Good afternoon. Good afternoon to our colleagues from Far Eastern University and to the teachers and attendees from other institutions. Good afternoon. I am Bethany Marie C. Lumabi, your moderator for today's webinar. Welcome to another leg of FEU Teachers Education Summit 2020. The Institute of Education presents this summit in commemoration of the National Teachers Month from September 5 to October 5, 2020. Today's webinar is entitled Pecha Kucha on Education Advocacy, which starts and promotes continuous discourse on critical issues emerging from the multidiscipline aspects and perspectives of and on education. This brings together FEU's very own esteemed faculty members on one stage to start the talk and share their viewpoints on specific areas of their research specialization and interests. Moreover, this is a venue for educators to echo their advocacy, as this, in many cases, is the heart of their research to fight for a cause they believe in. To begin our program, allow me to introduce our very own guest speakers, starting off with our first presenter. She obtained her bachelor's degree in English Studies and Master of Arts in Reading Education from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She is a full-time faculty in the Institute of Education and currently teaching language and communication courses at FEU Manila. She has taught research, language, and reading classes and has engaged in literacy and research conferences both as a speaker and a participant. She has trained teachers to improve their literacy and language pedagogy skills. Please welcome Miss Irish Sharina M. Digo.
Good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon, Miss Irish. Thank you very much. Our second guest speaker is an FEU faculty from the Department of Literature. Our second guest speaker is an FEU faculty from the Department of Literature and Language of the Institute of Arts and Sciences. He teaches courses related to philosophy and history in the social sciences, humanities, and general education. He has also handled workshops in facilitating courses in general education, namely ethics, readings in Philippine history, the life and works of Rizal. He graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in history and master's in philosophical research, both from De La Salle University, Manila, where he is also currently taking doctoral studies in philosophy. His research interests are in the fields of ethics and epistemology. Please welcome Mr. Marco Antonio O. da Silva. Thank you, Sir Marco. Lastly, our third guest speaker is currently finishing PhD in philosophy at De La Salle University, Manila, with philosophy of literature and education as areas of study. He finished the degree and master in philosophical research at DLSU and Master of Arts in Education, major in literature at the Filipino Normal University, where he also finished his Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Secondary Education, ABBSE, in literature. He served as a coordinator and faculty trainer for general education and is currently working as the coordinator for the Office of the Student Academic Concerns at FEU. He is also a full-time faculty in the Institute of Education, teaching literature subjects such as literary criticism, world literature, teaching and testing literature, contemporary and popular literature, Philippine literature in English, and Spanish literature in the Institute of Arts MA in Letters. He is an advocate of multicultural philosophy, addressing issues of identity politics in literature and education. Please welcome Mr. Percival S. Paras.
Hi everyone, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Salamat po.
Thank you, Sir Percy. Before we proceed to the discussion of each speaker, we would like to remind everyone that this event is being recorded. And please be reminded that an open forum would commence after all guest speakers have presented. Thus, we encourage all of you to type in your questions or comments with your name and affiliation. To deliver the first Pecha Kucha presentation, again, here is Miss Irish Sharina M. Digo.
Thank you, Ma'am Lumavi. Okay, I'll start off with my presentation already. And I start off with a question, reading comprehension in college. Well, it's a question for me, and maybe it's a question also to my fellow teachers. And if you are an educator, you probably encounter reading comprehension in researches in elementary school and high school. But I think it's also important for us to ask, should we talk about reading comprehension at the college level also? And you might have heard of the results of the PISA survey in 2018, and the Philippines was one of the participants in this survey. And PISA in general looks at or assesses three areas, and these are reading, mathematics, and science. Maybe it's not going to come as a surprise to everyone that the Philippines has ranked very low in all three areas, in reading, in math, and even in science. But we actually scored really low in terms of reading. We are there at the bottom of the list. So out of the 77 countries, we are at the 77. Okay? And they surveyed 15-year-old students back in 2018. And going back to my earlier question a while ago, why should we look at reading comprehension in college? Because those students who were surveyed in 2018, if we ask where are they now, they're probably in their last year in senior high school, or maybe some of them are already in college with us. So the question of reading comprehension in college does not seem so random anymore, and it becomes all the more important if we look at the results of the PISA survey in 2018. And my advocacy for the rest of my talk is very simple. We ought to do more research on reading at the college level. And like what I said a while ago, much of what we know about reading came from results of researches done on elementary school students and high school students. And what do we know so far? So there are three main factors that affect the Reading Act, and these are the context, the reader, and the text. I'll talk about each of them one by one. First, the reader. So the reader looks at the motivations of a person when it comes to reading, the linguistic knowledge of that person that he or she brings to the reading act. And next is the text. So when we read, the materials that we read are also our reading or our comprehension of the materials that we read is also influenced by the difficulty of the text that we read, the complexity of the sentence structures that we find in those texts, and also the vocabulary that's contained in those texts. And lastly, we also look at the context or basically the purposes for reading. Why do students read? Is it basically for educational purposes or is it for recreational purposes? So all three, context, reader, and text, affect the reading act. And going back to my original question, why should we do more research in college reading, particularly reading comprehension? This is because all of these three aspects change when you go to college. What do I mean by that? Let's go first to the reader factor. Our students, when they were in high school, even before they set their foot in college, they probably, most of their reading probably revolve around reading memes and reading Facebook posts, maybe, and tweets on Twitter also, and probably some occasional fiction. So when they get to college, what do we expect them to do? We don't expect them to read a lot of these anymore. Rather, we expect them to read more advanced academic texts. And usually these texts are very complicated. And the structure of the sentences are also more complicated, at least more complicated than the ones that they've been used to in the past. Also, the text, like what I said, changes dramatically also. They're not going to be reading posts anymore or memes anymore. Rather, they're going to be dealing with very complex texts in college. And even the context for reading changes as well. They're not going to be reading more because they want to read, but because they have to read and they have to gain some foundational knowledge about their courses, and they're going to be needing these knowledges when they eventually enter their future profession. So apart from the three factors that affect the reading act, again, the context, the text, and the context, the text, and the reader. What else do we know about reading? Reading is a skill, and like any other skill, you get better at it the more you do it. Yeah, that's one. And another is that there have been proven strategies to help someone repair comprehension breakdown. So summarizing, these are some of the strategies that good readers use when they run into some comprehension problem. Summarizing, paraphrasing, predicting, those are just some of the few. And what else do we know about the Reading Act? And this is probably very important for us as teachers and even for students, that the connection between reading and writing has been fairly established before. So one thing that I'd like to point out is this one. All good readers are good writers first. Let me say that again. All good readers are good writers first. And that brings me again to my point a while ago. Why do we need more research on reading comprehension? We need to be able to answer questions like, which strategies do our students already possess? Which ones do they need to learn and apply? And what other factors affect their comprehension? Or what particular comprehension strategies would work for them? And also, how can we motivate them to read? And as we get answers to these questions, I believe we'll have better chances of providing concrete help to our students. We may not significantly alter the grim reading statistics of our entire nation, but surely we can do something where we are. And I believe it all starts with seeking answers to questions that will help us help our students read better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Irish, for your very stimulating presentation. Your advocacy reminds us, not only the language teachers, but also other content teachers, to do more research on reading comprehension, particularly in college. You're right. Teachers and students should practice good reading strategies. Our second speaker to deliver the second Pecha Kucha presentation, please welcome again Sir Marco. Sir Marco Antonio Ocampo de Silva.
Okay, so hi, hello again, everyone, and good afternoon. Um, so I was asked here by Sir JJ to share my teaching advocacy. So once again, I am Marco, and I'm from the Department of Literature and Science, Institute of Arts and Sciences. So rather than going technical about this, I chose to go in a narrative and an experiential type of presentation. So it will be basically coming from my experience to where I am right now. So there. So I guess my advocacy all began in my journey. And this journey of mine started back in my undergraduate days when I chose to pursue the field of history. Then, like any undergraduate, I guess, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in life. But as I go through it, I go through the program, I was developing this interest on historical narratives, on what we can know about the past and how we can learn from it so that we can improve the present. But that was basically the sentiments and the interest that I was developing at the time. However, it didn't stop at that. And as I've said, like any other undergraduate, I wasn't exactly sure, so to speak, on what I wanted to do with what I was knowing or what I was learning throughout my journey in history. But it all took a turn when I encountered this book from René Descartes, which is from philosophy, the one that I am currently pursuing as my doctorate right now. Um, when I encountered this book, I sort of encountered questions that was not available for me when I was just learning about history. In this book, Descartes wondered about the truth of things and how we were actually able to arrive at those truths and how we arrive at what you call knowledge, what we understand as certain and real. And in his questions, I sort of gained some interest as much as I gained some doubts on what I was knowing in history. So there was, in a way, a synthesis with what I was learning in history and what I was learning in philosophy. Back at this point, it was only a pursuit of mine, a personal leisure, I suppose. In contrast to history, that was the major that I was really taking. But nevertheless, in my learning of both, or in my study of both, I was getting more and more questions of which nature I was saying a while ago. It was this question on truth and how to understand it, so much so that we will be able to say that we actually know the truth, not only from the past, but also from or in the present. So, as I studied more and more philosophy and history, I encountered this guy. This one is Friedrich Nietzsche. He was a great um, 19th century philosopher who dabbled in the same disciplines that I was into, and that was history and philosophy. He argued that ideas in philosophy and all ideas uh, in the academe and in our lives are not insular or are not abstract. Rather, they are all found in the history that we live, or in the present and later on what will become of it, which is history. So, again, there was that synthesis between history and philosophy that I kept on seeing in the form of questions about truth, about understanding not only the context but also the ideas that were in the past and how they reached the present. And it just went on deeper and deeper until I understood the ideas in different ages or in different times, such as the ancient period, those that were shared by the likes of Socrates, who is also a philosopher, and also the Enlightenment period, the time where you have figures like Locke, Hume, these people who were not only thinkers but also products of their time. So there was this synthesis between history and philosophy that was intact all throughout my study of these people and their ideas and their time. I was always pretty much um, uh, how Bertrand Russell, another famous philosopher, react when he read these works. I was just in awe every time I see these ideas and how they're very much connected with history. It, in the word, allowed me to make sense of things, not only things that are external to me, but above all, my life as well. And then, after all of those studies at the latter end of um, my undergrad and what I have continued in my master's and now doctorate, is still very much in that form. You have this synthesis between history and philosophy. And now, as I learned from a lot of Western scholars, I'm gaining my appreciation as well on Philippine scholars, like the ones that are in front of you, Zeus Salazar and Teodoro Agoncillo. And I guess that sums up my development and also um, what became of my advocacy when I received the opportunity to teach myself, to share these ideas as much as these people had their own time. it is this interest on the world itself and understanding it, not only in terms of ideas, but also its times or its history. And by combining both in the form of questions, I guess that later on led me to have this sentiment or advocacy to share to my students that very same experience, that interest to learn and learn more things. That's why I shared this quote from Friedrich Nietzsche himself as my last slide. It says, "I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. Then I shall be the one of those who makes things beautiful." And that basically is summed up by his maxim, "Amor fati," to love one's fate. And I think that is basically what I want to share my students, to love life from based from understanding ideas and also history. So I think that's what I have to share for this afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Sir Marco, for your historical and philosophical talk. Your advocacy moves us to go back to the value of the past and how it helped us in the present. For our last speaker, let's hear it from Mr. Percival S. Paras.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity, first of all, Sir Joseph, Institute of Education, for this Pecha Kucha. And I am so excited for the next 10 minutes, excited to talk about what I'm really passionate about. And before I begin, before I continue, have to, of course, open my slides and, okay. Hold on. There you go. Okay. Can you see it? Sep, kita? Okay. Hi. So before I begin, I would like to show some pictures in relation to what we're going to talk about for the next 10 minutes. And I'm sure most of you are teachers, maybe some of you are planning to be, or some of you are, you experience, all of us experience education. This is a sample of an instructional material somewhere out there. And it says here, look at item number 2. I am Filipino and I am domestic helper in Hong Kong. Okay, some people would say there's no harm in that, but if you are a critical thinker, definitely you would see that there's something wrong, something uncomfortable with that kind of example. Moving forward, look at this second slide, second picture. There is a comparison between a beautiful and an ugly. This is from an Indian textbook. And of course, you know that it is kind of insensitive to brand somebody ugly because of probably skin color or probably the appearance and what have you. Okay, what about this one? I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, have heard one point in time about some stereotypes about our Middle Eastern fellows, quoting them as terrorists, quoting them as, whatever, barbaric, or people would just do something harmful. And these things are coming from a perspective that is very myopic. And that is kind of, a big statement to say, but that leads us to what we're going to talk about. Okay, now we know that recently we had this event, George Floyd, and this actually shakes the entire social media world and, of course, media as well, talking about this gruesome incident that happened, which led a lot of people to having this movement called Black Lives Matter. Okay, so somehow you kind of see some similarity with these pictures that I'm showing. And of course, recently, if you are in TikTok, you are in social media, probably you're familiar with this one, the incident where the hashtag cancel Korea actually became popular. And these things led us or leads us to something that has to do with race and identity. And that's basically what I want to talk about today. At this point, I want to share my, not just sentiment, but my advocacy on multiculturalism, multicultural education, and the politics of recognition. I remember growing up as a kid, growing up in a space, a location, a territory somewhere in a different part of the world where everybody's white and I am the only brown person. Everybody is Catholic and I'm the only Jewish person. And all of these experiences growing up led me to wondering why am I different and why people would treat me different. Bakit nga ba pag iba yung tao in terms of identity, in terms of background, in terms of language probably, there's always that automatic stereotyping and categorization and things that is probably different from our own reality. It's because I believe that people are somehow in need of what we call multicultural education. I mean, talking about people saying we're not racist, we're not this and that, but practicing it one way or the other in social media, in the way we treat other people, other races. And because we know that in the 21st century, the world is kind of small. Okay, we are easily connected with so many races, so many people groups, so many cultures. It is important, I believe, to talk about multicultural education and the heart of all of these problems that we're seeing today, which is the politics of recognition. To begin with, what is multiculturalism or multiculturalism? Just to give us an operational definition, multiculturalism seeks the inclusion of views and contributions of diverse members of society while maintaining respect for their differences and withholding the demand for their assimilation in the dominant culture. So every time you look around in your classrooms, in your communities, we know that there is always a dominant culture. Probably a culture that is imposed by whoever is in authority or the majority of people there. And even in our classrooms, we know that there is somehow an ideology that is dominant. Assimilation calls for a dialogue, a praxis, an understanding, or the deeper understanding of the people that is not part or different from our own reality. So when we say diversity as quoted in the definition, we're talking about diversity in terms of race, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of religion, gender, subculture. Maybe some of you belong to the whatever subculture, diba? I'm part of the emo group, I'm part of this, the K-pop fans, what have you. Of course, we can go as many as subcultures as possible, but anything that is different than our very own reality, that is part of diversity. And that is one of the things that I'm really passionate about. The acceptance, not just the tolerance, the acceptance, the understanding of the people different from us, okay, the other, quote unquote. And just to give us a quick history of multiculturalism, it started in education. It started with a group of people in the 60s and the 70s in the West wanting to be heard, wanting to be included. These Black people, these people of the Latin Americas wanting to be part of the ideology, the bigger ideology. And scholars extended the talk about multiculturalism, not just in terms of skin color and ethnicity, but of course in terms of different cultural backgrounds, such as gender and language and religion, and of course other communities and people group. And it's important for us to be sensitive about the differences of other people, because I believe understanding and appreciation of culture starts with us understanding that the world does not revolve around us, that people are different than our own reality. And it's not all about who we are and the kind of background and identity we have. So it calls for an openness in terms of the differences of other people. Charles Taylor, a Canadian philosopher of education and researcher and an advocate of multiculturalism, I would say one of my heroes in terms of the multicultural education, centers his philosophy in what we call identity politics. And going back to my story, when I was a kid, because I am different, I look different, I speak differently, that led me to like having that consciousness that differences separate people. We know that differences separate people. Kaya nga tayo, di ba? Automatic in our nature, we flock with the people of the same feather. Sabi nga nila, people of the same feather. Birds of the same feather flock together. And that is automatic for us, human beings. We always want to look for similarity. But we're not conscious about looking for our differences and celebrating it. That led us to the problem. What is identity politics? Ano ba tong politika na to that has to do with our pagkakakilanlan or identity? Quickly, the idea of recognition, as Taylor explicitly points out, is not just the mere acknowledgement of person or a group, but an equal treatment of such in a given space where plurality of identity coexists. Okay, I want to highlight the plurality of identity. Just like what we said previously, people are different. People are complicated. The humanities is actually complicated. You are encountering people not of the same ideology, the same background, the same culture, the same language, the same interests, okay, the same trip in life. Okay, so the openness to welcome these people of different understanding and background actually is the very heart of identity politics, multiculturalism. There are three problems that I quickly want to talk about. Okay, some heavy terminologies here, but please bear with me. We have the homogenization, categorization, and of course, non-recognition. So I want to quickly talk about homogenization. By the way, the pictures that you're seeing are just random pictures that communicates differences. So in a way, I'm not pinpointing anything here. Okay, so homogenization is the differing background. Differing background are treated same and equal through their common identity. In effect, differences are ignored and an adherence to a single culture trumps over the celebration of diversity. And just like what we said, mahilig tayong lump ng similarity ng mga tao. Think about this. When we were in elementary and probably in high school, especially if you're a product of public school, I remember in my high school days, there is section 1, okay, the bright section, the intelligent ones, the smart. And then section 2, medyo okay naman, di ba? Medyo pwede na. Section 3, a mix of intelligent people and people who probably are not really interested according to the label. Section 4, 5, and so on. So kung may section 9, probably you would know that these are the different ones, quote unquote. But that sectioning or homogenizing students can actually be a problem because we are automatically categorizing people based on our own perception. And we look at that on a standard that is different from our own reality. Diba? So there's actually harm in homogenization, in making people grouped as similar. And that leads us to the second problem, categorization. Such categories on race, ethnicity, gender, occupation, economic status, politics, sexual orientation, mainit yan ngayon, among many, can be used as instruments of power and exclusion, which may lead to oppression of the one being categorized. So when we categorize people, it's always coming from a misunderstanding. When we categorize, for example, the previous examples that I gave, you categorize Middle Eastern people as probably terrorists, okay, very insensitive. But that's coming from an understanding that was imprinted in us based probably on a dominant culture, probably the Western media. My mom is Middle Eastern, so I understand what I've been through, what we're talking about. Okay, because we're different. And I remember going to places where predominantly white people are there, di ba? They would always look at us and think, baka terorista tong batang to, baka ganito, baka ganyan, di ba? Those problems growing up actually led me to this advocacy. Okay, so there's always the exclusion. We want categorization, and that's bad. Okay, that's harmful. Last one is non-recognition. It shows not just a lack of due respect. It can inflict a grievous wounds, saddling its victims with a crippling self-hatred. Recognition is not just a courtesy we owe people. It is a vital human need. It's a human need. We all want to be recognized. And some of us would probably say, okay lang naman if I'm silent about it. I don't talk about it. I don't talk about the different people. Okay, probably we'll just be quiet about it. But being quiet, not including them in the discourse, not including them in, probably the policy or anything else, means non-recognition. And the moment we do not recognize a certain minority, a certain people group, deliberately, what we're saying is that they're not part of the conversation. Kaya madaming misconception, kaya maraming stereotypes, because we are not talking about it. Because we are not including them, thinking na the more I go again, the more I detach myself from being associated and talking about them, the more I'm safe. But actually, it produces more harm than good. That's non-recognition. These things are the problem attached to the idea of identity politics. Okay, so the thesis is that our identity is partly shaped by recognition or its absence. often by the misrecognition of others. And so a person or group of people can suffer real damage, real distortion, if the people or society around them mirror back to them a confining or demeaning or contemptible picture of themselves. That is the very heart of the problem of multiculturalism. Okay, so now the thing is, anong magagawa natin? What can we do about it? We're talking about Teachers Day. We're talking about Teachers Month, rather, and talking about highlighting education. And by the way, happy Teachers Month to all our teachers there. So what can we do about it? My suggestions are actually all rooted or centered on education. Number one is student-centered learning. I keep on emphasizing this in all my classes. Make students co-constructor of the learning process. Curriculum and instruction must not be dominated by a single person's identity. It's not always the teacher who's dominant about what he or she wants to happen in the classroom. Student-centered learning is a paradigm of education that opens the conversation, that opens different backgrounds, different identities, different people as part and, of course, co-constructor of the learning journey. It's important. Of course, it's a different talk in itself, but remember that student-centered learning opens opportunity for plurality of identities and backgrounds to be heard. Number two, instruction. When faculty members do not teach students how to view their own work and personal space from a multicultural lens, they create a covert bias that limits students' growth and development. That's why reflection is important. That's why asking students to work on activities that would allow them to integrate the lesson in the humanities, probably in literature, in philosophy, to their own reality, instead of just pen and paper exams, which is, I'm not saying it's bad, but instead of just being strict about the kind of assessment and instructions we're doing, open it for dialogue. Make the lesson integrated in the reality of the different plurality or identity that is represented in our classrooms. Number three, instructional materials, selection and representation of texts. Deliberately include the minority, the unpopular, the controversial. Sorry for the dot there. The controversial, the misrepresented. Okay, don't just talk about Shakespeare. Everybody knows Shakespeare. But let's talk about literatures from the minorities. Let's talk about the Lumads. Let's talk about the Aitas. These people needs to be heard. These people should be part of the conversation, of the discourse. The less we know about them, the more stereotyping and non-recognition and identity politics happen. That's why 21st century is actually a good position to open our eyes, open our hearts to the differences of people. Let's make racists scared again. Okay? Let's not be the one adjusting for them. And it all happens in the classroom. I always believe in the next generation. I always believe that for us to have a better country, a better nation, we start where the young people are. That's why as we end this 10 minutes, I hope I did not exceed, I want to leave everybody with this statement. Let us raise a generation of young people who will correct the mistakes of our past. Let's open our borders. Let's talk about them. Let's befriend them. Let's open dialogue with them. Because the more we connect with people of the different realities, different from us, the more we're making the world a better place for us to live in. Thank you so much for hearing me out again. Let's all be multicultural. Salamat po.
Thank you, Sir Percy, for your vivified discussion. Your advocacy in multicultural education opens the heart of recognition or recognizing and celebrating diversity and differences. Yeah, we are with you in that. Okay. So we are now proceeding with the open forum. And again, we would like to thank all our guest speakers for their insightful discussions. So as we move on to our open forum, we encourage our audience to type in your comments or questions with your name and affiliation. Kindly specify to whom are you directing your question. Okay. So let's read some of the questions posted here. I believe this is about reading. Yeah. So from Miss May Versosa, this is a comment in the state mentioned good readers are good writers first. I think we have to rethink our activities in the basic education by focusing more on writing practice in a developmental way. As a Filipino teacher, coming from a basic education institution, I can already imagine how to integrate writing in all the other macro skills. That's good to know, Miss May. You would like to add something on this? You would like to add, yes, Miss Irish?
Yes, thank you, Miss May, for the question. And thank you for pointing that out. And I need to correct myself there. Sorry if I mixed things up a while ago. It's actually this way. It should be said this way. Good writers are good readers first. Okay, reading is very much connected to writing, but good readers are first, very good readers. And I do agree with you that it's a challenge for us teachers to integrate writing in what we teach, right? But going back to what I was talking about a while ago, what's foundational really is for us teachers to help our students improve their reading comprehension. Because once we do that, we actually increase their chances of improving their writing as well. But thank you, Ms. May, for your comment.
All right. So let's have another one. Uh, Another comment from an anonymous person. We have, if reading comprehension is important and with the fast paced culture now, would you agree that it is already high time to teach the students, especially college students, the skill of speed reading rather than the traditional method of reading? Yes, Miss Irish?
Yeah, thank you again for the question. Personally, I do believe there's value in speed reading, but I'm also thinking about the kinds of materials that we ask our students to read at the college level. Based on my experience, reading these materials, speed reading would work sometimes, but if you're processing very difficult text, I think you need to have better strategies in order to process the material. What speed reading does to you is you're able to read a lot of pages in just a short span of time. Well, what happens in the comprehend? What happens with what you read? Do you really comprehend them? And I think it's more important for us to make sure that our students are actually understanding what they're reading, not just finishing what they're supposed to read within a span of time. Thank you, Miss Beth. Thank you for the question.
All right. All right. Thank you, Miss Irish. I believe Sir Percy would like to add some more input on this. Since literature and reading go together, you would like to add something on that, Sir Percy?
Literature and reading. Yeah, I actually agree with what Miss Irish said. And siguro on my end, I wanted to be deliberate in terms of the use of literature because yes, reading is good and that develops our reading comprehension, di ba? Making us more, understand the world better. But of course, with my bias, I wanted to, of course, infuse reading specifically literary text because that will not just open or that will not just develop our critical understanding, our comprehension, but rather it would also open our eyes, diba, to see the differences, which is also connected to what I talked about, diba, to see the world. While you're comprehending and developing your critical comprehension, your reading comprehension, you are also opening your eyes to see things beyond what is just part of your reality. So I would agree with what Miss Irish said, and of course, ibebenta ko talaga, diba, to read literature, not just any other text, diba? Include literature in your reading selections. Yun lang po.
Yes, I do agree with you, Sir Percy. So whatever you read, as long as you're reading, whether it is literature or academic, it's still reading and it's good. Okay. Now, let's have one question from an anonymous. For I believe this is for Sir Marco. The
Mhm.
question is, history and philosophy can be intimidating to some students. How can we make them enjoy learning them? Yes, Sir Mark.
Mm.
What's your
Mm.
suggestion?
Well, for me, in relation to making, I guess, these subjects more approachable or um, more relatable for students, it's going to be in the form of integrating um, pop culture to the facilitation of these subjects or the administration of these subjects. Because the tendency of a lot of professors when they handle philosophy or history subjects is that they tend to discuss it in their own time, and I can't blame them for doing that because that might be their preferences, and that's what they are most familiar with. However, I guess to give the same robust experience for the students, it has to be on their own time. So you have to consider the problems that they are experiencing, the sentiments that they have, and that's often expressed in their culture or the popular culture of their time. So for me, it's always going to be integrating pop culture in um, the facilitation of these subjects to make it less intimidating for students. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sir Marco, for emphasizing and promoting pop culture. Yes. We have finally reached, or unfortunately, we do not have the luxury of time, but we shall try to address some of the questions on the upcoming webinars. We would like to thank all of you for sharing your comments and questions to our guest speakers. So, as I've said, we have finally reached the end of our program. Thus, we would like to hear some takeaways from our guest speakers. Okay, so let's start again with the only Rose in the group, Miss Irish.
Sorry, Miss Beth. What was that again? I'm sorry.
Uh, can you share
Um,
a takeaway for
I'll
everyone?
take away. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, maybe just to answer that question, because I read one comment in the Q&A also, and this person is asking how can we encourage students, or how can we encourage people to read what they're interested in if they they don't even know what they're interested in to begin with. And I think I'm gonna borrow some tips of Sir Marco a while ago. And I believe in integrating pop culture also, because when it comes to reading material, when it comes to reading and cultivating the love for reading, you got to start where you're really interested in. And a lot of our young people today are so interested in pop culture and social media and the like. Why not start there? Read materials that talk about your favorite artists out there. At least you are immersing yourselves in materials that talk about the things that you're interested in. So my takeaway, I think, or I what I want everyone to take away from today is that pay attention to reading and cultivate your own reading so that you can pass it on to your students as well. Thank you.
Very well said. Thank you, Miss Irish. And Sir Marco, any message for our audience?
I guess my takeaway for students and for aspiring educators is keep on asking questions, keep exploring, and of course, keep reading so that you can pass on and, if not, improve the ideas that we have developed. So, to borrow the quote from Isaac Newton, if I have seen further, it's because I stood in the shoulder of giants. I think that basically sums up my sentiments on education itself and why we should value it as much as we should continue it. So there.
Okay, thank you for your words of wisdom. Sir Marco. And lastly, Sir Percy, any point of reflection for everyone?
Hi. Okay, I believe I already said a lot, but I want to leave you with what I'm really something that's burning in my heart, and that is the young people. I always believe that if you want to, I'm kind of idealistic here, but if you want to change the world, if you want change to happen, you start with the young people. You start with where they are. And as people of this generation, probably an older generation, let's protect the young people. Let's advocate for them. Let's celebrate their differences. Let's make it like a connection between generations to generations, diba? If we are, open to our differences, we can always advocate for the other. I remember one philosopher who said, I think it's Sartre, who says that we are responsible for the other. And having said that, if we look at that in the perspective of advocating for our young people and celebrating their differences, it's different in terms of iba sa atin, diba? Their language, their religion, and everything. I believe that sounds corny or idealistic, but we can make this world a better place. Diba? We can always open our borders, our hearts, and we are the world's people. We're different, but we're the same. So yun lang po. I hope that we will be multicultural in our perspective. Salamat po.
Okay. Thank you again, Sir Percy, for your multicultural message. Once more, thank you to all our guest speakers and all the members of our audience for joining us today. On behalf of our dynamic dean, Dr. Harold John D. Kalala, and the Institute of Education, we look forward on the celebration of the National Teachers Month, and we hope that everyone will continue to join our succeeding events. Goodbye, everyone, and have a good day.